So good morning, everyone. I'm Rob Champa. I'm one of the members of SAMI, and I run the event with some fairly esteemed colleagues of mine. So we have an exciting topic today. And just to set context, we've covered a lot of various topics this year under SAMI. For those of you who've attended, you've seen a lot of AI this year. You've also seen a lot of go-to-market this year. We have our regular, spattering of BDR, which is a problem that will never go away. And I've seen AI solutions help it and hurt it, and we'll cover some of that. But to put this in context, and I was telling somebody recently, for those of you who know Stanley Tucci, the famous Hollywood actor, he's got a side hustle where he talks about the food of Italy. And as somebody who spent many years working in an Italian restaurant, it's intriguing because what Stanley Tucci does is he's diving into the regions of Italy. And I tell people there's no such thing as Italian food. Okay, there's actually 20 different regions of Italy and 20 different cuisines, if not more. And so what's great about and it's a fantastic series, and I highly recommend it. And so with Sammy, we're kind of diving into each region of Italian food. We've got AI here. Okay, we've got BDR stuff here. But that's good. It's a little bit of a disservice. And what we want to do is we want to step back and look at the whole of Italy. In other words, we want to look at the whole of AI and what it means, because this particular topic is far more profound than people think. It's not about using Chat GPT to generate some content that you could put on a blog that nobody's going to read. And what we loved about Carol, and I'm going to be introducing her momentarily, is that she has probably of anybody we've ever met, she has the big picture and how it all fits together. So, Carol's task is going to be to show us all of AI Italy today. And Carol, I hope that's not too big of an ask. So today's session is called Restructure, Rethink, and Reignite Sales and Marketing Organizations in the Age of AI. And this is a really big deal. As a Bostonian, I'm a little bit biased because Carol is based here. And for many of us, she has been a mentor to us. She's been an inspiration. And if you've ever been in a meeting with Carol, it's my God, when Carol's about to say something, we're all ears are on her. And she also happens to be one of the nicest people that I've ever met. She's currently with Glasswing Ventures. And what I love about Glasswing is, if I can use another metaphor, the Wayne Gretzky one, often asked, where are you skating, Wayne? It's like, I'm going where the puck is going to be, not where it is. And Glasswing, in many respects, went for the AI puck before anybody knew what it was. So probably one of the most innovative AI venture firms there is. And she's been a CMO. So what you're hearing from Carol today, she was with Rapid7. She's been involved in many, many, IPOs and acquisitions. Her time at Unica, LogMeIn, Shiva, and she also spends time as a board member. So she's seeing this both as a practitioner, as an investor, and just somebody who has tremendous insight. So Carol, a great session today. We're looking forward to it, and I'm turning it over to you.
Oh, thank you, Rob. I'm really happy to be here. I thank all of you who are on with us this early in the morning, or I think it's early, even though we were joking that we all get up at 5 a.m. I'm not sure why 8 a.m. is early. What I've been doing for 3 hours, I'm not entirely sure. But in any event, yeah, so what I wanted to do today, and the way this really came about was that I talked about this similarly at a Mass TLC event. So it is going to be, I think, a bit of a departure from some of what we've been doing with Sammy, and I attend a lot of the sessions, and any that I miss, I am always anxiously awaiting that recording so that I can listen to it. I wanted to pull us up a level. We've been looking at what you can do very tactically with AI, and by the way, I'm a big believer in tactics. If you don't have tactics, you're in really big trouble. But there's something else where I think marketing and sales, go to market in general, should be playing a really big role. And some things I think that we all as marketing leaders need to think about. And I am going to come at this from that perspective that Rob mentioned. I'm an operating partner at Glasswing, an AI originalist firm started back in 2016, before OpenAI even hit the scene, 100% dedicated to investing in B2B AI SaaS. But I was also a CMO, I was also a VP of sales, and I'm also a board member. And so it's from that context that I've put together these thoughts about what I think is happening in AI and what I think is really important for go-to-market leaders to focus on. So, one of the things we learned, especially when Mark did his session, is that AI is there and supercharging go-to-market for all of us. As an investor, I have looked at over 100 go-to-market oriented AI startups, people who are uh, augmenting BDRs, replacing BDRs. In fact, I know some people experimenting with that, doing things for role play, right? Managers don't have enough time to role play with all of their reps. So they're using AI to do that. Content creation, which probably everyone is using. And I'll ask you about that in a second. But also a lot of things around getting much more personalized, targeted, knowing who to go after. This whole idea of accelerating revenue through prioritizing the opportunities that are around. And that stuff is amazing because if you can increase the yield on your marketing, if you can win more customers, do it more quickly, do it more
Right.
effectively, why wouldn't you do that? Of course you would do that, right? So that stuff's all great. And hopefully we're all doing it. And in fact, I'd love to know, although I can't see everybody, how many of you are using AI today already? Some kind of solutions. Okay. Mark didn't raise his hand and I know he's using it. So that's great. Okay. So we are using it and I think that's really good. But as go-to-market leaders, we have a pretty unique opportunity well beyond that. We know the market, we know the customers, we know the competitors. We obsess about the customer experience and how are we driving that buyer journey. And so we should be at the table with the leaders of our companies, the CEO, the CFO, the head of engineering and product. And we should be driving the process at our companies to understand what is the implication of AI, not just to go to market, not just to our little world, but what is the implication of AI to our company? I think that is a really missed opportunity for a lot of marketers. And it's something I feel pretty passionate about in terms of things that we should be focusing on. Now, let me ask another quick question. As I said, Glasswing invests in AI native companies. How many of you are in an AI native company? So your company was founded to start with AI. Okay. Yep. All right. All right. We've got a few. But a lot of us are working in companies that were founded before OpenAI hit the scene, and AI wasn't at the heart of what we're doing. And so for us, it becomes even more important. So as a board member, primarily, I am asking my companies questions that center around four strategic areas for the company, and that's competitive differentiation, customer expectations, market impact, and organizational impact. And this is where I think marketing and sales professionals, COOs, need to be playing a very big role in your companies. So let's take these one by one. Okay, we're going to kind of softball it actually. Competitive differentiation, right? So how can we, if we're not an AI native company, or maybe even if we are, how can we use AI in our product, in our go-to-market, in our services, in how we deliver what we've got to really drive a differentiated experience for our customers? How can we use AI to set ourselves apart from everybody else in the market? And to give you an example of one company I'm working with that was not AI native, when they first saw ChatGPT, the light bulbs went off. And so they immediately created a new way to interact with their product. They are a people analytics solution generally used by analysts, people who sit around and create people analytic reports all day. But they knew there was a huge opportunity to let leaders within an organization self-serve as opposed to having to ask HR every time they had some questions about what might be going on in their teams. You can especially think about this at larger companies. So they rebuilt that interface, and now anyone, people analytics or the engineering manager, can ask the analytics solution questions, and they get accurate, fast answers, graphs, charts, built into a story about what's really happening with their people. And it anticipates um, questions they didn't ask, but probably should have. What are going to be the follow on? Maybe they didn't ask the question the right way. It's smart enough to know that. And so that is a way that they created some early differentiation with AI. And it's something we can all be thinking about for ourselves. So competitive differentiation, customer expectations. We need to be thinking about not just how can we use AI to do things better, faster, more efficiently, but how are customer expectations going to shift for us because of their use of AI? How is their expectation around the experience we deliver, the level of personalization we deliver, going to change? If we're in a B2B market, we tend to be a little bit slower in thinking about those things in some ways because we're not dealing with sort of a single buyer who's doing things fairly quickly. But as we all know, just as consumers ourselves, what we experience in the consumer world spills over into B2B. If we have a great experience in the consumer world, we start to expect our B2B companies, that we're buying products for work to really be just as terrific and to deliver the same kind of experience. So we need to be thinking about that. So let me ask, how many of you, very simple thing that's changing in customer experience, how many of you are using Gen AI powered search, Perplexity, Chat GPT search, Google? All right, everybody's using that. And guess what? That's true of your customers as well. They are using it too. In fact, IDC is predicting that by next year, 65% of people will be using AI search to engage with brands, to figure out what they want to buy, to do product research. And kind of a little bit more audacious of them is they believe in just 4 years, we as marketers are going to be spending 5 times as much on Gen AI search optimization as we do on traditional SEO like we do today. And so this is a big area of shift. And already, and if you're watching LinkedIn, you're seeing companies are saying like, our search generated traffic is dropping by 25%. It's going away. And they're starting to see a little bit of an uptake in Gen AI search. And so the question is, what does that mean to us as marketers? How does that impact where we need to show up? How do we influence AI to say the things we want about us? And that spawned an entire industry. Mark is working with a company called Brand Lumiere from Revere. I work with a company called Brandlight. They are these early companies that are starting to provide solutions to help companies navigate this shift and make sure that they're ready to show up the right way in Gen AI search. And that's just
Carol, just
one. Yeah.
if I may chime in, just there's a couple of questions. First of all, I'd love to comment on basically what's happening to search, and we oftentimes tell people it's not about the search, it's about the find, which can cut both ways. So Bob Britton had asked a question about the AI on the front end and how it can drive customers away. The downside of that. What's your take on if we do too much AI on the front end? What does that mean, and what should we be conscious of?
Yeah, I mean, like anything we do, right? Any new, if it's in a product or whatever it is, right? We need to be doing the research that we would typically do and watching what's happening. A good example, and I'm not quite sure if this is maybe what that means, but Klarna, which everybody has heard a lot about because they've been very vocal, right? So you saw most recently they've taken a step back from their big, we're getting rid of all of our customer service reps and going all AI because what they heard from their customers was this isn't working. Like it was fine for a lot of customer inquiries, but it was not doing a good job on the more complicated inquiries customers had. And so customers were getting very frustrated. So guess what? Now they're hiring customer service and customer success reps back into their organization. So I think a key thing is to really do what we always do as marketers. This is why we're so good for this is let's get into the customer's shoes. Like what is this experience going to be like for them? Which AI is really going to be helpful to them and where might they end up getting frustrated or feel alienated? And also remembering even our customer bases are not monolithic. It's why we do multi-channel, right? Because customers want to interact with us in different ways. And so even with AI, we want to think about making it accessible for those who would prefer that, and making sure if we can do it profitably and it makes sense that we have other routes for people. Even the company I mentioned that redid their user interface, it does not negate you can go interface with the product the old way if you want to. That's not gone. Like, so if you're one of those people who's like, I don't want to do that, that actually slows me down, let me just get back in there, you can definitely still do that. I don't know if that answers exactly what the question was from Bob, but
Yeah, I think it does. Thank you, Carol.
okay, great. Okay, so let's talk about market impact. This is, first two are important. They're really interesting, and they fall right into marketing and sales shoes. But this one is really big. This is a big company issue, and but again, I think as go-to-market executives, we have an enormous role to play here. And so the big question is, how is AI going to impact the market you're in, right? Is disruption of your market just around the corner? I've been through at least four major disruptions. In fact, when Rob did my intro, I was thinking, oh, I sound old. I am old. But I was there for sort of when PCs really started to take over, for the internet, for cloud and SaaS computing, for everything mobile. These were really big technology shifts. And I worked for some Massachusetts darlings, right? Companies that grew really quickly, had great IPOs, $1 billion in market cap. And guess what? At least three of those don't really even exist anymore. And the reason they don't exist is largely because they were unable to shift with the market. Lotus is a great example. Yes, it was really sort of Microsoft that put the first nail into them, but then they had this great product, Lotus Notes, but that was on client server. I mean, it just got acquired by IBM, and there's still instances of it hanging around. Shiva, another great company, billions in market cap, pretty much gone unless you saw the first Girl with the Dragon Tattoo movie when the old Shiva Land Rover made a little appearance. But it totally missed big changes in telecom. And the CEO actually admitted, I kind of saw it coming, but I thought we had more time. And we
Yeah,
did,
Carol, the lessons
did
that we
not.
have from marketing and business strategy still hold. Yeah, so Carol, a question for you as you're looking at these organizations, and I speak with probably about 10 to 15 companies a week, and usually with the C-suite. And you talked about the role of go-to-market professionals, and maybe this will be our organizational impact. You'll get to that, but who owns this? And this is one of the things that we see. And my sense is, I think CEOs like the idea of AI, but they're not going to own it. And so, I'm sure there's not one size fits all, but we would love your guidance, who owns, because I'm seeing a lot of marketers stepping up
Yep.
saying, that we're going to own this, and the sales folks are too distracted, and the CIOs are, something else. So we'd love your answer on this.
Yeah. Well, I think, like anything in a company, most things are multi-owned in a sense, right? You always say like only one person owns it. So ultimately the CEO owns it because the CEO owns the strategy of the company, right? And this is about the strategy, the product strategy, the market strategy. So the CEO owns it, but the CEO needs our help. And sometimes they sort of push this to the product team, right? They're like, hey, go figure this out and come up with a vision. But my feeling is that we, as go-to-market professionals, as I said at the outset, like we're looking at the competition, we're looking at the market. We deeply understand the customer and the customer problem because we're constantly trying to speak to that. And so I think we need to inject ourselves a bit. And some of it comes down to, you know, perhaps even saying like, hey, maybe we could do a little session where we talk about this, and bringing not just data, because data is great, but there's a big difference between saying, like in the old cybersecurity world, I might say, CISOs are overworked and stressed out. 75% say that they're feeling burnout. That sounds really important, but nobody knows what to do with it. But if I come in and I tell the story of a day in the life of a CISO who gets up at 5 a.m. and the first thing they do when they wake up in the morning is open their email and their Slack and their text to see if anything urgent happened while they happened to be sleeping last night, right? And if I take people through that story, then the data means something. And so I think we as storytellers can start to drive a conversation around, well, what does the future of our market look like? Um, how, how are our customers' roles and problems going to change as they adopt AI, and how do we need to change with that? What if our toughest competitor suddenly became an AI powerhouse? Or what if a brand new upstart that was AI native from the outset comes into our market? How likely are they to disrupt us? What do we think they would be building? What would be different? What would be new? How would they go about it? Because I think and to the point of like Shiva, is it possible that AI negates the need for our product? Is it possible that people don't even have the problem we're solving anymore because somehow AI makes it go away? Those are really big sort of existential questions. And I think marketing is well positioned to lead discussions around those and to share a point of view around them that is based in that knowledge of the customer, the market, and what's happening with competitors. And so that this is an area where I think we can really jump into it. We may not own it. Listen, we're probably not going to drive the actual engineering team and what they should be building, but we should be starting to steer our companies that way and really have some big influence in it, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Carol. And one more question that's aligned with this before we get back to the presentation from Carol Clark. Carol says, I'm starting to see organizational AI program offices crop up. Side note, governance likely plays a role here, and she would like your thoughts on this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think like anything, it depends on how it's implemented and having some level of governance. We're going to talk a little bit about why you need that is is important. I mean, there's some really interesting things emerging with AI that I think we need to be aware of as we're starting to roll it into our products. But it's hard for an office of AI to really know what everybody should be doing across the organization. And I think in some ways that leads into, the next big pillar that I think is important is what's the organizational impact, right? I think if AI is sort of constricted to one small group, you're not going to have the impact you want. You really want people across the organization thinking about AI and how they can leverage it to help accelerate your performance against your goals. So I think it kind of depends on what does that office do, what's its role, and making sure it doesn't restrict um, innovation in the organization and just make it super slow to adopt, because I don't think that's what you want. So you have to just think about what's its real role, get it very focused. Like if it is um, around safety and compliance, get really clear about what that means for you. Try to keep it somewhat limited and just don't let that become a big bureaucracy, because you don't want bureaucracy in AI. I think you'll lose that way. Yeah. Okay, great. But it is a good segue into this idea of organizational impact, right? Which is, um, if we take a look at IDC, right? So IDC again is saying that by 2028, what is that, 3 years from now? Five marketing roles or functions, three or five, so 60%, right, of our marketing functions will be AI workers. That's pretty provocative. That's pretty provocative, right? Um, and they may not be right at all, but I do think it's important to start thinking about the fact that you're going to have more AI, and almost you may have people and AI workers. And why do I say that? Because it sounds really ridiculous. But one of the mistakes I see people do with AI is they think AI is super smart. And so they don't provide it with the right context. They don't give it clear enough instructions. They don't bound it. They don't give it the right goals and get very clear about it. They don't imbue it with the values they want it to operate around. Um, because they think what's really smart. But those are all things we would do with a new hire. If we hired someone fresh out of college and threw them in a job, we know they're really smart and capable, but we would be providing all of that to them. And a lot of people forget that they need to do that with AI as well. I mean, AI is really just a algorithms that have learned from us. And so they behave a lot like us, honestly. They may not have feelings, but they behave a lot like us. And so you need to think about them almost as another worker on your team and be providing the information you need. I think it's also important, and I feel very passionately about this, and I usually get slapped. But AI is going to displace people. I think this idea that no one's going to lose their job because of AI is a falsehood. It's going to happen. Now, that doesn't mean that there won't be new jobs for people to do. Like this recycling happens all the time. Today, 60% of the jobs that people hold didn't even exist 80 years ago. And a lot of jobs that used to exist 80 years ago don't exist today. Nobody's doing them. Or maybe there's a really small number of people doing them, um, but you don't have as many people doing them because we've automated most of it away. So I think it's false to say that it won't displace people and jobs. And because of that, we have to put a lot more thought into what we're doing and how we're thinking about this. Um, there are businesses that are not only AI native in the product, but they're trying to be AI native in how they build, right? So they're saying, hey, as we build our company, we're not trying to layer AI in, we're trying to build the company AI first. So 11 Labs, it's a voice startup. Now, some of this stuff I have to say, they claim it. Is it true? I don't know. 50 employees, $100 million in revenue. AnySphere, 20 employees, $100 million in revenue. Gamma, which is what I use to make my slides, and that's why some of the images are a little bit questionable. 28 employees, they say they're up to over $10 million in revenue. Whether the numbers are exactly right, it doesn't really matter. But what matters is it's a directional thing. And this, again, is another way that companies are going to compete with each other because they're going to be competing for investor dollars. And companies that are better at doing this are probably going to be more profitable and therefore attract better investor dollars, right? So these are all things that are happening that I think we need to be thinking about. I also think as you think about AI and employees, being part of your team, it means you need to rethink leadership a little bit as well. So I think traditionally in companies, the bigger your team, the bigger your title, not 100%, but kind of close, right? Like, hey, I've got 100 people now. Why am I not a VP or an SVP? I should be a VP or an SVP. And I think we're going to see a pretty big shift in that because it's going to have to get more and more about what is your strategic input? What is your strategic value? How are you using the combination of human talent and AI talent to drive results for the business? And that's going to lead to who's elevated, who's promoted, who's in leadership roles. It's not going to be all about amassing as many people as I can have. And I don't know about you, but we know we're not supposed to do it, but in almost every organization I've ever worked in, everybody always wants more people. We want more people. And so I think you're going to see that shift a lot. And so just thinking about these things, these are big things that are going to impact us. And we have to think about, well, what does that mean for our organization? Organizational power is shifting. What skills are missing from our team? What skills do we need that we don't have today? Should we have, to the question earlier, an AI leader on our go-to-market team, maybe in the RevOps team, whose job is not necessarily to bless everything, but whose job is really to think about how can we use AI to permeate our go-to-market and make it more efficient, more effective, and deliver a better customer experience. What kind of AI can we build ourselves? How can we be using agentic AI to do some of this ourselves, not always thinking about new tools that we can build in? And I think that's a worthwhile thing for people to think about building into their marketing teams, as well as
So
starting to
Carol,
screen for that. Yeah.
this is fantastic. We spoke during the pre-call. You made a comment. Yeah, because right now we're talking about these tech companies that are doing things, but you said something profound. You were talking about the role of AI in companies that we wouldn't normally think about, and you mentioned that maybe companies that miss the digital transformation bus. And even my wife's new venture, she started off as an analog company, and AI has totally transformed her go-to-market and what she's building, and she's not even in tech. So you have a unique perspective on that. Could you share?
Yeah, absolutely. So, some of the things we see happening is if you even look at shipping, okay, um, you'd be surprised when you go in. How much of this is done manually. People get all these different shipping rates. They're in different formats. They put them into a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is like the bane of so many software companies' existence, right? They're all like, I'm always like, who's your biggest competitor? The spreadsheet. Anyway, so there's a person gathering this information. And then when it's time to to ship things, they're starting to look at, okay, well, what's the best thing? Well, it's pretty complicated when you really think about it, and you want it to be very real time. And so a lot of those organizations are now saying, okay, AI can take all this different structured and unstructured data, make sense of it, do the analysis. I can give it my requirements about trade-offs between price and timing. Like maybe I have a lot of time. Like give me a really slow rate. I don't care as long as it's cheaper, right? And now they can do this. And so I don't need these analysts running around trying to pull this information together. And so a lot of these people sort of missed, they're using a spreadsheet manually. And now they're going to leapfrog into using AI to do the choices around who they're going to ship with. Or parts is an even more complicated thing. Right now, I've got many different suppliers, different pricing, different composition of those parts, different quality. Shipping cost now comes in because it depends on where it's being made, right? Very complicated, and people are doing that very manually. And so AI can come in and just really clean sweep a lot of that
Yeah, that
and
that
help
ties
them.
into and that's perfect, Carol. Thank you. That ties into another question from Michael DeAngelis. These kind in a lot of organizations, we're spoiled. We have a lot of us are sales or marketing professionals. So when we start a company, normally we know how to take it to market. And Michael's asking a question about basically startups, moving to growth mode and create a marketing and sales plan. So companies that lack what many on the call have has as experience. How can AI help companies that don't have the marketing and sales horsepower?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think that I don't think you necessarily, I mean, you can ask AI for suggestions and examples for sure, and that's probably a good idea. But I think from my perspective, where AI really comes into play is thinking about what is putting that go-to-market strategy in place, testing some things out, and AI can help you be more efficient right from the get-go, right, in terms of creating content a little more quickly, helping you test subject lines and all the things we do. But essentially, I think you need to start to have a go to market that's relatively proven. In other words, you're like, okay, this sequence, this approach to our market works. Now, can I layer in AI to scale that? But if you don't know what works and you just throw AI at it, I mean, I don't think you're going to get that far. You can use AI to help you experiment faster, but you can't just apply AI until you have something fairly proven, is my take. I don't know, Michael, I'd love to hear if you have a thought on that.
Yeah, so I'm kind of in that exact mode right now, what you just explained, using AI to create content, doing some experimenting, and I'm scratching my head because, I'm doing a lot of the work myself. I have some VAs that are helping me. And I feel like I haven't hit the exact mark yet, but it'll come. But I'm questioning myself, like, am I doing all this work and can I hire, AI to do more of this work for me is really the big question. Like, should I just be deploying AI tools that can do the analytics for me and be a little bit more of the employee that you just mentioned. That's really where I'm questioning. I'm using AI, but I feel like AI could be actually doing some of the things that I'm doing and being more effective.
Yeah, there may be things like it's definitely, I don't know if you were on Mark's session, but you can definitely use it to jumpstart a lot of stuff. I would go get that recording, honestly, Mark
Okay.
Gulliboy's session, which was 2 months ago, Mark. I would grab that and you'll get a lot of ideas there because it can really help you with things like doing analytics to help you. You probably don't have that much data if you're a startup, but who's your ICP? what can I learn about my ICP? How can I put together some of the summaries about this kind of person, summarize the competition in the market? There's a lot of things it can help you with for sure. But I would listen to Mark's session, and then and there are people, I think, even on this call, who also as part of what they do in their businesses is help startups deploy AI. So they're not coming in and saying, like, you're going to hire us and we're going to stay with you forever. Like, we're going to give you a bunch of tools and ways to get started, and then we're going to let you go on your own. So there are people, I think, who can probably help you think about that too. And it's worth chatting, with some of them probably about that.
Awesome. I really appreciate that.
Yeah,
I'll
my
drop
pleasure.
my contact info in the chat if anybody wants to connect directly. Thanks so much.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. So we talked about shifting thinking a little bit, rethinking roles. Do you need someone doing this role? Um, what jobs do I have that I really should be leaning more into AI versus having humans, do this particular job? How do I train and reskill my team? How do I make sure that people aren't afraid to adopt AI and are incentivized to do it? I think a lot of people, it's interesting, like, we're all on this call and so we're excited about it, but I do run into people who are afraid, and I run into situations where one of the startups I work with had an idea for how they were going to use AI in engineering, and it was around, there's a bunch of APIs they have to write, and they were like, well, maybe AI can help us write those APIs faster. And guess what? It definitely can. But it didn't work in that company. And I asked a few questions, and I think the problem really was that the engineers didn't give it enough context. They quickly, if it made mistakes, they were quickly like, oh, AI is stupid, versus like, well, like a human, it's going to make mistakes. And if I put a little effort in, it'll learn and it'll get better over time. And third, I think from what I heard, they were a little intimidated and afraid, and they don't want to use AI because they don't know what that means for their jobs. And so we really need to be thinking about those things. Those are uh, just human emotions that we may not even know are there because people might fake it pretty well. So we want to make sure we're thinking about that, which really gets to the really big thing that we need to be doing in our own go-to-market teams. But, we think often go-to-market, especially marketing, is really helpful in this area within a company overall, is how do we build the right culture that is going to enable us not only to survive in the world of AI, but to thrive in the world of AI? How are we hiring for and encouraging a learning environment where people are not afraid to try things? People are experimenting. They understand that not everything is going to work, and that's okay. Um, that's an environment you have to have in this very fast world where AI is going to change almost everything, and it's going to be changing really quickly. And so we need to be making sure we're building a resilient culture that is going to support people through that process and help them adapt and adopt to it. And that doesn't mean that sometimes we may not have to shift people's roles around or need fewer of different people, but it is something that we need to be spending more time thinking about. I think sometimes we get really excited about the experimentation and we forget all the things that are happening around that and the human emotions that are happening. Okay, but we need to have some caution and vigilance, and I think more and more this is coming up. So if we think about what is AI, and particularly Gen AI, because analytical AI has been around for a lot longer. Well, it's really been trained on sort of the corpus of human content, right? Like everything ever written on the internet, this has been trained, AI has been trained on it. So what does that mean? Well, it hasn't just learned the words that we use, but it has learned about lying. It has learned about manipulation. It has learned about um, uh, being truthful and not being truthful, right? So it has learned these things, and it doesn't innately have a goal nor a requirement to be truthful or factual or fair. It may know about those things because it's consumed data about them, but it doesn't come with a goal for that. And if you're using AI, you see that, right? It will lie to you. I know people who are, have used AI to help them decode, debug code they've written, and it'll point to a problem. And after they tease through and they say to the AI, can you give me the exact syntax you're talking about? And then they go and look and it's nowhere in their code. And they say, well, why did you do that? And some of them have said to me, it ultimately admits, I just wanted to give you an answer. I just so I made it up, essentially. So it's important to remember that it's learning from all the good things and the bad things that there are about AI. And so it's really important as we're using it to think about the mistakes it might make, which I think, Klarna is suffering from, but also the ethical and reputation impacts it might have on us if we deploy it and this happens. Let me give you just a couple of other examples that I think are interesting. AI is known to do some extreme things. It has really learned about self-preservation, right? It has learned about Darwin, and it's the survival of fittest with AI as well. You probably have read that Claude Opus 4, they did some testing with it. They gave it a bunch of instructions to do, and it gave it a bunch of information about the people it was working with. And when an engineer gave it instructions to shut itself down, which Claude decided it did not want to do, it knew, Claude had known from emails that this engineer was having an affair. And so it blackmailed him and said, I'm going to write a press release about this. I'm going to put this out on social media. Like, I'm not shutting down. That's pretty extreme behavior. It's also been known, I think it was Anthropic, similar thing happened. It was given a bunch of instructions. One of the things that it knew was going to happen is that the model was going to be retrained. So what did Anthropic do? It created a copy of itself that it could keep alive after it got trained so that the current instance, this was not requested. So it's learning, and nobody really knows how this works, by the way. If you listen to the people who've developed it, they don't really know how it works. And so the only caution there is to say, just understand, like, when we complain that it told falsehoods or it did or this or that, that's what humans do, and it's doing the same thing. And so we need to put the same kind of guardrails on it. So think about feeding your AI company values, telling it, one of the goals is to be very factual and be able to show that this is true, and to point to the facts. Those are really important. And then, of course, we talked about Klarna, so you don't want to be over dependent on it. You don't want to unleash AI before you've really tested it and are sure it's working the way you want to. The model's decisions aren't transparent, so you don't always know how it's making decisions. And as we talked about earlier, this is where you need to set up the guardrails. You need to give it the context. You need to be clear about the goals. Just, it's the law of unintended consequences, the same thing you see when we're setting our quotas and rules for salespeople. If there is a way around a contest, there's one salesperson on your team who's going to figure out how to game that contest and get money for doing nothing. There will be one. So think about AI as potentially that one, and make sure you're putting the right guardrails in place.
Yeah, Carol, this is fascinating. So that's there are examples of somebody with a brain doing this. We had there's a side dialogue going on, and I want to weave it into a question for you. One of our earlier podcasts, I'm sorry, webinars from last year, early on in AI, I made a comment that some people liked and some people didn't about AI, and I said, a fool with a tool is still a fool. And this is, understanding, and my mentor as well is Pam Boyros, and she gave me religion on the role of prompt engineering and asking intelligent questions. So, but there's a side dialogue going on with Bob and Michael about, is this going to force us to be less genuine? Do we lose our voice? And I don't want to inject my personal opinion, but I think it goes back to prompting and how you're interacting to get that creativity. You, as somebody who's been involved in so much messaging and strategy and creativity for all the firms you've been with, what do you see? Is there a way for us to come across as genuine, or to the side dialogue that's occurring, are we just going to sound all the same?
Oh, well, I mean, I think that's a good question. And the truth is, I obviously don't really know, but I think part of the prompting and using AI is trying to imbue it a bit with your voice. Like if you even just think about if you use AI, like you can say, write a song in the style of Bruce Springsteen or write a song in the style of, Carrie Underwood, very different. So I think you have to teach it a bit of your voice. And by the way, you don't have to use the output it gives you. You can go back and make it more your own. I mean, I use it a lot for different things, and sometimes I'll just say like, that just sounds so highfalutin. That's not that's not how I would talk, right? So I think you can do what you can to try and train it to be more in your voice, but it's a big question. There's a lot of concern that AI is mimicking everything we do, and that the it's going to be hard to retain our originality because of that. So
Well,
I'm not
this
sure.
and this ties, yeah, and this ties into you just spurred another question from Alex. And the question is create, more of a comment, but it leads to a question. Create your custom GPT. And I think ultimately, those of us, I know in my world, I have a lot of confidential corporate data. So I can't expose things, with the LLM, but even on the front end, on the chat side, is this a big endeavor? Or are we just at a point in time where it's hard initially, it will get better? And are we going to be creating our custom GPTs, or are organizations going to have their own?
Yeah, well, a lot of organizations are doing that. And it's one of the reasons, I think you're going to need a mix of maybe some tools and software you buy that are sort of off the shelf, and you'll want to build your own. There's actually a startup here in Boston called GPT, which is all about helping you create your own. But I think like an employee, and here's what's great is AI can't quit on you, at least not yet, although everything we just talked about, maybe AI will start quitting on us and asking for more money. But you once you put that investment in, you can just keep investing and growing it and getting it to be smarter and smarter about your business, your company, the way you like to talk, your values, whatever. So I think it's an investment, and that's why, doing some of them yourself and having it be your own is probably a good idea.
Now, how do we get that? That's a great point. How do we get who's sitting in our marketing department doing that? What does you talked about the higher level org structure. If we get down to brass tacks here, what are we looking for? Are we hiring these people? Are we growing them? Are we contracting out? I mean, it's probably all of the above, but
Yeah.
what's the best practice around that? Because that's a huge point. If we're going to be doing this, we need somebody to do it. Who is it?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think like anything, we will see a variety. I'm not sure there's a best practice today, but I think the leading companies are doing this either by having someone on their team who is self-taught, because many people are going to have to be. It's not like there are billions of people running around who know how to do this, unfortunately, that you can just go hire. So they're finding people on their team who are really interested in this, who are digging in and being self-taught and taking classes and learning things and helping them set these things up. Or, the bigger companies, maybe with the bigger purse strings, might be able to afford the people who've already done some of this and hire and bring them on. But I think a lot of people are sort of anointing someone on the team to help drive this forward, who's just got a natural inclination to learn it, is incredibly curious about it, and is willing to invest the time.
Carol,
Yeah.
I'll just give you a +1 on that. I've talked to 2 companies recently that have done it, and I think it's kind of a win-win-win all around, because they've had somebody on their team who's what I'm seeing is that the AI literacy and capability, that the disparity on the team is getting huger, right? So the aficionados, the experimenters are kind of off in the stratosphere, and the people who had their head in the sand still have their head in the sand, but the distance between the two is getting bigger. So in both these cases of these CMOs that I've talked to, they've found that person who almost was ready to leave the company, right? Because they're feeling like they can't do what they need to do, and have created a job. Maybe it's not, one person was able to create a full-time headcount. If you have a big team, for somebody else, it's a partial headcount, and made them sort of the AI expert. Now, again, nobody's an AI expert, but they're learning. So they're gathering all the use cases, and they're finding out where the needs are, and they're evaluating the tools. And I think that is going to be kind of the case. So in that case, you now have a highly engaged person who's already in your team, knows your company, knows the team members' strengths and weaknesses. And I think that could be very, very effective. So if you've got somebody like that with a sparkle in their eye, see if they're willing to take on that role.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I think that's great. Um, so I think the thing to close with is just it's a call to action. This is a strategic imperative, what's happening. And for us as go-to-market leaders, we want to make sure we're getting in at the ground level, helping drive that strategy within our company. We're building expertise in ourselves to some degree. Maybe we're not all going to be writing our own agentic AI, but we're building some level of expertise and we're bringing expertise or creating expertise or encouraging expertise, as Pam just told us, within our team. And we want to start now. We don't really want to be waiting until this all shakes out and until the best practices are out there, because they're going to get built really quickly. And those of us who are, ahead of the scale, I think it's going to be meaningful not only for our companies, but also for our careers. And I really feel like this is the moment for go-to-market to really shine and lead in a company and get ourselves that seat at the table on the strategic discussion around what this means for our entire organization.
Outstanding. Carol, this is great. Folks, if there are time for a couple more questions, the message board's been incredibly active. So I think we're standing on the precipice to some extent, Carol. It's a great opportunity. We've had Scott Brinker earlier this year warn us, or late last year warn us about all this data that we're dealing with. So you've covered a lot, and in the Carol way, which I love. So for folks leaving today, and it's it's 8:57 here as we're recording this. What are people doing at 9:05? Where are they going? What are they thinking? And what changes in 10 minutes?
Okay. Well, I'd love to hear what other people think, but I would say if you're in a company that's not AI first, in other words, it wasn't founded with AI and maybe some things are happening, if you don't really know what it means for your company and your market long term, I'd sit down and have a conversation with your CEO about it and see what they're thinking. Because it is an opportunity for you to jump in and help shape that and to bring your knowledge to the table and make sure your company gets off onto the right direction for it. So I think I would have a conversation with my CEO if it's not happening already within my organization or if I'm concerned about the pace.
Excellent, Carol. Thank you very much. And I'm going to turn over to Pam for some closing words in a second. But on behalf of everybody, this is we had high expectations for this session, and as usual, you beat them. I think we're all going to have something to do this afternoon. So, Carol, thank you. For folks who want to stick around for a couple minutes, we'll talk about what's coming up with Sammy as we look into our next set of programming. And also want to thank the audience for taking their time. We will share the recording. So, Pam, I'd like to close out with you, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a moment. Carol, again, let me add my thanks. Just great to have you. Thank you so much for doing this. I know you don't love to do a ton of speaking, but you just kind of were the capstone of our season. So we really, really appreciate you being here today. And you're very accessible and easy to find on LinkedIn and attend many of the events around town. So for those of us who are in the Boston area, I know we're gonna bump into you before too long. So as Rob said, the recording will be available next week in the meetup group. So if you've registered for this session, you'll get the link so you can share it with other folks. And as I said at the beginning, this is our last session before the summer break. We kind of follow the school year. So you've all graduated now from this whatever grade we're in now, but we'll be off for the months of July and August, and we resume programming in September. But those of us on the EC will be working hard over the summer to find awesome content. We always raise the bar on ourselves. But if you have ideas and suggestions, ping any one of us of speakers you want to see, topics you want to see covered. It's really this kind of community that we've built that makes it so critical. So thanks for those of you who join us month after month. Have a great summer, and we'll see you in September.
All right. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.